Hey, so tonight we're going to dive into something that most history books kind of gloss over. What daily life was really like for ordinary people in the Soviet Union. And trust me, it's going to make your worst neighbor complaints seem like nothing. In the Soviet Union, your biggest enemy wasn't war or famine. It was your next-door neighbor. The state turned ordinary people into informants, children into weapons against their parents, and trust into a dangerous luxury no one could afford tonight. Discover what it was really like to live in a society where paranoia wasn't a mental illness. It was a survival skill. Oh, and if you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. Super curious where you're all listening from. So drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. Always blows my mind how people are falling asleep to this all over the world. All right, find that cozy spot, take a nice slow breath, and just let your body sink into whatever you're lying on. We're heading back to Soviet Moscow, 1955. And trust me, you're going to be real grateful for that comfortable bed by the time we're done. So, congratulations. You just woke up in Moscow, 1955. It's been 2 years since Stalin's death, but his shadow still looms over every aspect of daily life. You're lying on a narrow iron bed in a communal apartment, what the Soviets called a kommunalka, sharing this cramped space with 3 other families you barely trust. The room is cold, really cold. The radiator beneath the single window rattles occasionally, but provides little actual heat. Your breath creates small puffs of vapor in the early morning air. The walls are thin, paper thin really, and you can hear the Petrov family next door having what sounds like a whispered argument. But you've learned not to listen too closely. Curiosity about your neighbor's conversations can be dangerous here. The smell hits you as consciousness fully returns. A mixture of cabbage soup from last night's dinner, unwashed bodies, and that peculiar scent of damp wool that seems to permeate everything in Soviet apartments during winter. There's also something else, something chemical and sharp that you've never been able to identify. It seeps through the walls from the factory district, a constant reminder of the industrial paradise you're supposedly living in. Your alarm clock, a cheap Soviet-made timepiece that gains about 5 minutes every day, shows 5:30 a.m. You need to be at the bread queue by 6 if you want to have any chance of actually getting bread today. Yesterday you arrived at 6:15 and found only empty shelves and the apologetic shrug of the baker, who whispered that a shipment might arrive tomorrow. Might, everything in Soviet life comes with that qualifier. You swing your feet onto the cold linoleum floor, your toes immediately recoiling from the shock. The slippers beside your bed are thin, worn through at the heel, but they're what you have. Replacing them would require either a special permit, connections you don't possess, or a black market transaction that could land you in prison for speculation, the catch-all crime that covers anything the state doesn't like. The apartment is stirring to life around you. You hear Mrs. Kozlova in the kitchen, probably starting the endless process of trying to make something edible out of whatever rations she managed to secure yesterday. The sound of running water is brief. Hot water is available only 2 days a week in this building. And this isn't one of them. The pipes groan and clank. A mechanical symphony that's become the soundtrack of Soviet morning routines. You reach for your clothes, folded neatly on the wooden chair beside your bed. The shirt is cotton, serviceable but rough against your skin. The pants are wool, heavy and dark. Darker colors hide stains better. And laundry soap is often unavailable. Your jacket hangs on a hook near the door. A thick brown coat that serves as both winter wear and a symbol of your status as a factory worker. The better quality coats are reserved for party members and their families. As you dress, you automatically check the small notebook you keep hidden beneath your mattress. It contains nothing incriminating, just grocery lists, work schedules, mundane details of daily life. But you check it anyway, looking for signs that someone has been through your things. The pages are in the same order. The small pencil mark you made on page 12 is still there. Good. Today starts like yesterday. No evidence of a search. The kitchen is the heart of your communal apartment. And this morning it's a careful ballet of families trying to prepare breakfast without acknowledging each other too directly. Mrs. Kozlova nods politely as you enter, but conversation is minimal. The Petrov family keeps to themselves entirely. They moved in 6 months ago after the previous tenants relocated suddenly one night. No one talks about where they went or why. In Soviet life, people disappear, and asking questions about it marks you as unreliable. The gas stove has 2 working burners for 4 families. You wait your turn patiently. Heating water for what passes as coffee here. A brown liquid made from roasted grain that tastes nothing like the real coffee you've heard exists in Western countries. Sugar is rationed, and you use your weekly allotment sparingly, making each precious crystal count. Breakfast is a slice of black bread, yesterday's bread, slightly stale but still edible, with a thin spread of margarine. Butter is available only for special occasions or through connections you don't have. The bread is dense, dark, filling. It's designed to sustain workers through long factory shifts. To provide calories rather than flavor, you eat slowly, savoring each bite, knowing that lunch is uncertain and dinner depends on what you can find in the shops today. The radio in the corner crackles to life, broadcasting the morning news from Radio Moscow. The announcer's voice is enthusiastic, reporting increased production targets, successful harvests, and the continuing triumph of socialism over capitalist oppression. The numbers are impressive. Steel production up 15%. Grain harvests exceeding expectations. Worker satisfaction at an all-time high. You listen with the same expression everyone wears during these broadcasts, attentive but neutral, showing neither too much enthusiasm nor too little interest. But you know better than to believe the numbers. The factory where you work has been struggling to meet basic quotas for months. The promised new machinery never arrived. The safety equipment that was supposed to be installed last year exists only in reports filed with Moscow. Yet somehow, according to the radio, your factory is exceeding all expectations. The disconnect between reality and reported reality is so complete that it's become its own kind of truth. The official truth that everyone knows is false, but no one dares to question. After breakfast, you prepare for the morning journey to work. Your documents go into the inside pocket of your jacket, your internal passport, work permit and ration card. Losing any of these documents would be catastrophic, turning you into a non-person in the eyes of the state. Citizens have been known to starve because their ration cards were stolen, and replacing them requires navigating a bureaucracy that views lost documents as evidence of unreliability or worse. The morning inspection routine has become automatic. You check your appearance in the small mirror by the door. Hair neat, clothes clean, expression neutral. Looking too prosperous might suggest black market activities. Looking too poor might suggest you're not benefiting properly from socialist progress. The goal is to look exactly like everyone else, a successful member of the working class, neither too ambitious nor too complacent. Mrs. Kozlova's teenage son, Dmitri, is heading out at the same time, his school bag slung over his shoulder. He's a good boy, polite, hard-working, but lately you've noticed him watching the adults more carefully, listening to conversations with the intensity of someone collecting information. At school, children are encouraged to report on their families, to share details about dinner table conversations, to mention any complaints their parents might make about shortages or working conditions. It's presented as patriotic duty, as helping to build a better society by identifying those who aren't fully committed to the cause. You remember being his age? Remembering the pressure to prove your loyalty? The careful balance between fitting in and standing out. Too much enthusiasm for the regime marks you as potentially false. Genuine believers don't need to prove their faith constantly. Too little enthusiasm marks you as unreliable. Possibly dangerous. The sweet spot is a consistent, moderate display of satisfaction with your lot in life, gratitude for the opportunities socialism has provided, and quiet confidence in the future. The walk to the metro station takes 15 minutes through streets that tell the story of Soviet priorities. The main boulevards are wide, impressive, lined with buildings designed to showcase the power and permanence of the socialist state. But step into the side streets, the residential areas where ordinary people live, and the picture changes dramatically. Buildings are functional, gray, designed for efficiency rather than beauty. Windows are small, heating is inadequate, and maintenance is irregular. You pass the local shop, what the state calls a gastronom, and notice the queue forming already. The shop won't open for another hour, but people have learned to line up early for anything that might be available. Yesterday it was canned fish, last week it was soap. Today, no one knows what might appear on the shelves. But waiting in line has become a form of insurance, a way to be present when rare goods become available. The queue culture has its own etiquette, its own social dynamics. Regular customers know each other by sight, understand each other's family situations, share information about what might be available where. Mrs. Volkov, who works at the textile factory, mentioned yesterday that soap might arrive at the shop on Gorky Street. Mr. Petrov heard rumors of fresh vegetables at the market near the university. Information about goods becomes a kind of currency, traded carefully among trusted neighbors. But trust is always conditional, always fragile. The same neighbor who shares information about soap availability might report your complaints about the quality of available food. The line between community cooperation and state surveillance blurs constantly, making every interaction a careful calculation of risk and benefit. The metro station is a marvel of socialist engineering. Marble columns, ornate chandeliers, murals depicting the triumph of the working class. It's designed to showcase the grandeur of the Soviet system, to make ordinary workers feel that they're part of something magnificent and important. The contrast with the gray, functional world above ground is intentional, a daily reminder that socialism can create beauty, that the sacrifices required for the greater good produce results worth celebrating. The morning rush is controlled chaos. Workers flow through the tunnels with practiced efficiency. But there's an underlying tension that newcomers might miss. Everyone is watching everyone else, noting who stands where, who talks to whom, who seems too nervous or too confident. The metro is public space, monitored space, where unusual behavior gets noticed and remembered. You find a spot in the middle of the car, not too close to the front where party officials often sit, not too far back where troublemakers and dissidents might gather. The middle is safe, unremarkable, the territory of reliable citizens going about their daily business. You hold onto the rail and let the rhythm of the train lull you into the meditative state that helps pass the journey to work. The factory where you work produces machine parts for agricultural equipment, tractors, harvesters, the mechanical foundation of Soviet farming. The building is enormous, a monument to industrial ambition with high ceilings, concrete floors, and windows so grimy they filter sunlight into a perpetual twilight. The noise is constant, machinery humming, metal on metal. The shouts of supervisors trying to communicate over the din. You clock in at exactly 7 a.m., joining the stream of workers beginning another day in the service of the 5-year plan. Your workstation is in Section 7, operating a lathe that's older than you are. The machine works, mostly, though it requires constant adjustment and occasional persuasion with a rubber mallet. Replacement parts are theoretical, on order from somewhere, arriving eventually, priorities determined by factors beyond your understanding. Your supervisor, Comrade Volkov, makes his rounds with the clipboard that contains production targets, quality requirements, and the endless paperwork that allows the Soviet system to track every bolt, every hour, every deviation from the plan. He's a decent man, caught between the impossible demands from above and the daily reality of broken machinery and insufficient materials. Like everyone else, he's learned to navigate the gap between what's expected and what's possible. The morning's work is straightforward, machining components for tractor transmissions according to specifications that arrived yesterday from the planning ministry in Moscow. The drawings are detailed, precise, showing tolerances measured in fractions of millimeters. The reality is that your machine can't achieve half the required precision. The metal stock is of inconsistent quality, and the measuring tools available to you are worn beyond reliable accuracy. But you make it work. Soviet workers have become masters of improvisation, finding ways to meet quotas despite inadequate resources. You adjust the cuts to compensate for the machine's tendency to drift. You select the best pieces from substandard stock. You use experience and intuition to achieve results that should require better equipment. It's a skill born of necessity, perfected through years of making do with what's available. Around 9 a.m., production stops for the daily meeting. Workers gather in the main assembly area while Comrade Volkov reads announcements from the regional party office. Today's news includes commendations for factories that exceeded their targets last month, reminders about the importance of industrial safety, and updates on the ongoing campaign to increase efficiency through worker initiative. The meeting also includes time for self-criticism and peer evaluation. Workers are encouraged to identify ways they could improve their performance, to suggest modifications to work processes, to acknowledge any mistakes or shortcomings from the previous day. It's presented as collective problem-solving, but everyone understands the subtext. A chance to demonstrate loyalty, to deflect potential criticism, and to show that you're thinking about more than just your own narrow responsibilities. Today, Ivan Petrov from Section 3 admits that he wasted 15 minutes yesterday trying to repair a jammed conveyor belt instead of immediately calling for a technician. He promises to follow proper procedures in the future. Maria Kowalski suggests that workers in her section could increase productivity by reorganizing their tool storage. Comrade Volkov nods approvingly and makes notes on his clipboard. You remain silent during the meeting, offering neither criticism nor suggestions. Experience has taught you that speaking up draws attention, and attention is rarely beneficial. The workers who volunteer ideas too frequently are viewed as ambitious, potentially unreliable. Those who never contribute are noted as unengaged, possibly disloyal. The safe zone is occasional, modest participation, enough to show you're paying attention. Not enough to mark you as someone to watch. After the meeting, work resumes with the familiar rhythm of industrial production. The lathe hums, metal shavings accumulate around your feet, and the component count slowly climbs toward the daily quota. Your hands move automatically, guided by years of repetition, while your mind drifts to more immediate concerns. What might be available at the shops today, whether the promised coal delivery for your building will actually arrive, how to repair the leak in your apartment's ceiling without official approval. Lunch break comes at noon, exactly. The factory whistle blows, machinery stops, and workers flow toward the cafeteria like water finding its level. The meal is simple: soup made from vegetables and grain, bread, occasionally a piece of meat that's more fat than protein. The soup is hot, filling, designed to fuel workers through the afternoon shift. Quality is secondary to quantity. Flavor is secondary to nutrition. You eat with your work group. The same 5 people you've shared lunch with for 3 years. Conversation is carefully neutral. Sergei mentions that his wife found eggs at the market yesterday, a minor triumph worth sharing. Anna talks about her daughter's progress in school. Pride mixed with concern about the increasing pressure on children to excel. Victor complains about the cold in his apartment. A safe topic that everyone can relate to without political implications. But even these innocent conversations carry undercurrents of caution. Sergei's mention of eggs raises questions about how his wife managed to find them when others couldn't. Connections, black market dealings, or simple luck. Anna's pride in her daughter's academic success is tempered by awareness that high-achieving children receive extra scrutiny. More pressure to demonstrate political reliability. Victor's complaints about heating could be interpreted as criticism of the housing ministry's management. The afternoon shift brings its own challenges. The machinery, stressed by constant use and irregular maintenance, begins to show the strain. Your lathe develops a new vibration that affects the precision of your cuts. You compensate as best you can, but the quality control inspector notices the deviation when he makes his rounds at 3 p.m. Comrade Rykov examines your work with calipers and gauges, measuring dimensions against the technical specifications. 3 pieces are within acceptable tolerances. 2 are borderline, and 1 is definitely substandard. He makes notes on his clipboard, asks questions about the machine's condition, and reminds you that quality is as important as quantity in building socialism. The substandard piece goes into the rework bin, adding to your production time and reducing your efficiency rating for the day. In capitalist factories, you've heard, such pieces would simply be discarded. But in the Soviet system, waste is ideologically unacceptable. Metal, labor, time. Everything has value that must be preserved and redirected toward useful purposes. The rework bin represents not failure but resourcefulness, the ability to salvage value from imperfect circumstances. At 4 p.m., the afternoon break provides a brief respite from the factory floor. Workers step outside for fresh air and cigarettes, gathering in small groups that form and dissolve with the organic rhythm of workplace social dynamics. The conversations are different here, away from the formal structure of meetings and production schedules. People share gossip about supervisors, speculation about upcoming policy changes, and carefully veiled observations about the gap between official pronouncements and daily reality. You learn that Section 2 has been having problems with their equipment for weeks, causing delays that ripple through the entire production schedule. The promised replacement parts haven't arrived, and supervisors are pressuring workers to maintain quotas despite the mechanical issues. Someone heard that a delegation from Moscow will visit next month. to evaluate factory performance, adding pressure to meet targets regardless of practical obstacles. The information flows through informal networks that parallel the official communication channels. Workers develop their own intelligence-gathering systems, sharing observations and rumors that help them navigate the unpredictable landscape of Soviet industrial life. Who's being considered for promotion, which supervisors are under pressure from above, what new regulations might affect working conditions. This knowledge becomes essential for survival and advancement. Back on the factory floor, the final hours of the shift pass with the grinding persistence that characterizes Soviet industrial work. Quotas must be met, targets must be achieved, and the 5-year plan must be served regardless of individual comfort or convenience. Your lathe continues its mechanical conversation with the metal stock, producing components that will become part of tractors, that will work collective farms, that will feed the population, that will support the socialist state. By 6 p.m., when the final whistle blows, you've completed 95% of your daily quota. Not perfect, but acceptable. The rework piece cost you the time needed to achieve 100%. But 95% keeps you out of trouble while avoiding the suspicion that comes with consistently exceeding expectations. Perfect performance suggests either exceptional dedication or manipulation of the system, both of which draw unwanted attention. The evening cleanup is ritualistic. Almost meditative, you clean your workstation, organize your tools, and prepare the lathe for tomorrow's operator, yourself. Unless reassignment or illness intervenes, the metal shavings go into collection bins for recycling. The cutting tools get returned to the tool crib, and the workspace gets swept clean of the day's industrial debris. Clocking out requires the same attention to procedure as clocking in. The time card gets properly stamped, the security guard checks your empty lunch pail, and you join the stream of workers flowing toward the factory exit. 8 hours of your life invested in the great socialist experiment, contributing your small part to the transformation of human society through collective labor and shared sacrifice. The journey home reverses the morning's route, but with different energy. Morning travel is purposeful, directed, focused on arriving at work on time and properly prepared. Evening travel is more relaxed, but also more anxious. The workday is finished. But the daily struggle to find food and necessities is just beginning. The metro car is crowded with tired workers heading home to families, to communal apartments, to the private struggles that exist in the spaces between official Soviet life. Faces show the strain of industrial labor, the tension of constant vigilance, the fatigue that comes from living in a system where personal desires must always be subordinated to collective needs. You emerge from the metro into the early evening light of Moscow, the sun already beginning its descent toward the horizon. The air is crisp, carrying the mixed sense of coal smoke, cooking food, and the indefinable aroma of a city housing millions of people in insufficient space. Street lamps are beginning to flicker on, casting pools of yellow light that will guide people through the evening's activities. Your first stop is the bread queue, which has reformed since morning with different people pursuing the same essential goal, securing basic nutrition for their families. The line moves slowly, people shifting their weight from foot to foot. Hands deep in pockets, conversation minimal but not absent. Someone mentions hearing that a shipment of cheese arrived at a shop across town. Another person shares information about vegetables that might be available tomorrow at the central market. The queue culture has developed its own ethics, its own unwritten rules. People hold places for each other, share information about product availability, and maintain a collective watch for queue jumpers or black market dealers. There's mutual aid born of shared hardship, but also the underlying tension that comes from competition for scarce resources. When you finally reach the front of the line, the baker has only half loaves available. The full loaves sold out hours ago. You take what's offered without complaint, paying the fixed state price and receiving a small slip of paper that serves as both receipt and proof of legitimate purchase. Black market bread costs 3 times as much and carries the risk of arrest for speculation. Next is the general store, where the shelves display an optimistic variety of empty spaces, labeled with cards describing what should be available. Soap, says one card above a bare shelf. Canned vegetables, announces another above a space containing only dust and price tags. The clerk apologizes with the weary patience of someone who spends her days explaining shortages to customers who have no choice but to accept them. But luck smiles today. There's toilet paper. Not much and not of particularly good quality, but toilet paper nonetheless. You purchase your allotted amount, 2 rolls per customer, and consider it a significant victory. Yesterday, Mrs. Kozlova mentioned that her family had been using newspaper for a week. A newspaper doesn't absorb or decompose the way proper toilet paper should. The pharmacy visit is routine but never certain. Your monthly prescription for the heart medication that keeps your factory work sustainable requires presentation of multiple documents: your medical card, work permit, proof of residence, and a letter from the factory medical officer confirming your continued employment and need for medication. The pharmacist examines each document carefully, comparing signatures and stamps with the thoroughness of a document inspector. Today the medication is available, though the pharmacist warns that next month's supply is uncertain. The pharmaceutical factory that produces this particular drug has been experiencing production difficulties, though she can't provide specifics about the nature of the problems or when they might be resolved. You accept the current month's pills with gratitude and add medication uncertainty to the growing list of issues to worry about. The walk home takes you through residential streets that showcase the contradictions of Soviet urban planning. Grand apartment blocks designed to house the masses rise like concrete monuments to socialist idealism. But up close, the reality is more complex. Paint peels from exterior walls. Windows are cracked and poorly sealed. And the garbage collection system struggles to keep pace with the waste generated by dense urban living. Children play in the courtyards between buildings, their voices carrying the universal sounds of childhood games that transcend political systems. But even their play reflects the society they're growing up in. Games about catching spies, building factories, and serving the motherland. They've absorbed the ideological framework of Soviet life so completely that their imagination naturally expresses itself in terms of collective duty and political loyalty. Back in your communal apartment, the evening routine begins with the delicate negotiation required when multiple families share limited space and resources. The kitchen schedule has been worked out through months of trial and error, with each family allocated specific times for cooking and cleanup. Tonight is your turn from 7:00 to 8 p.m., giving you an hour to prepare dinner and clean up afterward. Dinner preparation is an exercise in creative problem-solving. The half loaf of bread forms the foundation of the meal, supplemented by a piece of cheese you've been saving since last week and some preserved vegetables from a jar you opened yesterday. The cheese is hard. The vegetables are mushy. But together they create a meal that provides necessary calories and some approximation of balanced nutrition. The cooking process is meditative, familiar, comforting in its routine predictability. You slice the bread carefully, making each piece substantial enough to satisfy hunger, but thin enough to make the loaf last. The cheese grates easily despite its hardness, creating small piles of protein that will be distributed across several meals. The preserved vegetables, warmed in a small pot, release their slightly sour aroma into the kitchen air. Mrs. Kozlova enters the kitchen at 7:45, 15 minutes before your time officially ends. But this is acceptable according to the unwritten protocols of communal living. She nods politely and begins organizing her own cooking materials, timing her preparation to begin exactly when your time expires. The transition happens smoothly, wordlessly, with the practiced efficiency of people who have learned to share space without conflict. Dinner is eaten in your small room, seated on the single chair with your plate balanced on your lap. The meal is simple but satisfying, each bite chewed thoroughly to maximize both nutrition and the psychological satisfaction of eating. You read yesterday's newspaper while you eat, Pravda, with its enthusiastic reports of industrial achievements, agricultural successes, and the ongoing triumph of socialist construction. The newspaper serves multiple purposes beyond information. It provides intellectual stimulation during the solitary meal, demonstrates your engagement with official Soviet discourse, and offers raw material for practical purposes: fire starting, package wrapping, and emergency toilet paper when the real thing is unavailable. Every household saves newspapers, not just for reading, but for the dozens of practical uses that paper serves in a society where consumer goods are chronically scarce. After dinner, cleanup is quick and efficient. Dishes get washed in cold water with a sliver of soap that must last the week, dried with a towel that's been mended several times, and returned to their designated storage space in the small cabinet beside your bed. Food scraps go into a container that will be emptied into the communal garbage system tomorrow morning. Nothing wasted that could possibly serve another purpose. The evening's domestic tasks continue with mending a small tear in your work shirt, a 30-minute project that requires careful stitching to ensure the repair will hold under factory conditions. Thread is precious, needles are more precious still, and new shirts are available only through official channels that require months of paperwork and proof of genuine need. Maintenance and repair skills are essential survival tools in Soviet daily life. At 9 p.m., the building's central heating system coughs to life, radiators beginning their nightly battle against Moscow's November cold. The heat is inconsistent. Controlled by a central boiler that serves dozens of apartments according to a schedule determined by fuel availability and bureaucratic priorities, sometimes the heat lasts all night. Sometimes it fails after a few hours. Sometimes it never starts at all. You prepare for sleep with the same methodical attention to detail that characterizes all aspects of Soviet life. Windows get checked to ensure they're properly sealed against the cold, though the frames are warped and the seals are deteriorated. Clothing for tomorrow gets laid out on the chair, examined for stains or damage that might require attention. The small notebook gets returned to its hiding place under the mattress. Your daily records of ordinary life that could become evidence of extraordinary crimes if examined by the wrong people. The radio in the corner provides background sound for the evening routine. Classical music interspersed with brief announcements about cultural events, political meetings, and opportunities for voluntary participation in community improvement projects. The music is genuinely beautiful, performed by talented musicians, serving the cultural mission of socialism. But even beauty carries ideological weight here. Selected and presented to reinforce messages about collective harmony and shared values. As you settle into bed, pulling the thin blanket over your clothes, sleeping fully dressed is warmer and more practical. The sounds of the building create a familiar symphony. Footsteps in the hallway, muffled conversations through thin walls, the groaning of pipes and radiators, the distant sound of traffic on the street below. These are the sounds of millions of people living in close proximity, sharing resources, adapting to circumstances beyond their individual control. Your last conscious thoughts before sleep drift toward tomorrow's challenges and possibilities. Will the bread delivery arrive on schedule? Will your lathe continue functioning without major repairs? Will the rumors about increased rations for factory workers prove true? Will the weather cooperate with your need to walk to work? Will your neighbor's teenage son notice anything worth reporting to his teachers? Sleep comes gradually, your body relaxing into the familiar discomfort of a mattress that's seen better decades. In a room that's never quite warm enough, in a building that houses too many people in too little space. But it's your space, your bed, your small piece of the vast socialist experiment. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new small victories, new adaptations to the gap between ideology and reality. But tonight, you sleep the sleep of someone who has navigated another day successfully, who has met quotas and avoided attention, who has found food and maintained the delicate relationships that make communal living possible. In the Soviet Union, that counts as success. The bar for victory is set low enough that survival itself becomes an achievement worth celebrating in the privacy of your own thoughts. Saturday morning arrives with a different rhythm than weekdays. No factory whistle, no urgent rush to join the commuter stream, no immediate pressure to begin industrial production. But weekends in the Soviet Union aren't times of leisure in the Western sense. They're opportunities to accomplish the personal tasks that weekday work schedules make impossible. You wake at 7 a.m. despite the absence of an alarm, your body clock calibrated to the needs of industrial life. The apartment is quieter than usual, though not silent, Mrs. Kozlova is already moving around in the kitchen, starting the weekend ritual of deep cleaning that all Soviet households undertake when time permits. The Petrov family remains behind their closed door. Though you can hear muffled conversation and the sounds of children being managed through morning routines, Saturday is laundry day, a process that requires coordination with other apartment residents and careful timing to maximize access to the communal washing facilities in the building's basement. You gather your week's accumulation of dirty clothes, 2 shirts, underwear, socks, the work pants that have absorbed a week's worth of factory grime and metal filings. The washing machine in the basement is shared among 40 apartments, so scheduling becomes a delicate negotiation of need, timing, and social relationships. The basement laundry room smells of damp concrete, soap, and the perpetual mustiness that comes from poor ventilation and constant moisture. The washing machine is a massive Soviet-built appliance that approaches its task with the same brutally functional efficiency that characterizes all Soviet industrial design. It cleans clothes through aggressive agitation and water temperatures that would damage delicate fabrics. But durability takes precedence over gentleness in socialist appliance design. While your clothes cycle through the wash, you sweep your room and organize your personal possessions. The small space requires constant attention to prevent accumulation of the clutter that makes tight quarters unlivable. Every item has its designated place, every possession serves multiple purposes, and nothing gets kept that doesn't contribute to survival or minimal comfort. Saturday morning also brings the weekly ritual of food shopping, a process that requires significantly more time and effort than weekday grocery purchases. Weekend shopping means longer queues, more thorough searches for scarce items, and the possibility of finding goods that aren't available during the week. But it also means more competition, longer waits, and the frustration of discovering that rumored deliveries didn't materialize. The Central Market is the focal point of Saturday shopping activity, a massive complex of shops, stalls, and queues that serves the grocery needs of half the district. Arriving early provides the best chance of finding fresh items, but early arrival means competing with hundreds of other families pursuing the same strategy. The market opens at 8 a.m., but dedicated shoppers begin forming queues at 6:30. You join the vegetable queue first, hoping that yesterday's rumors about potato deliveries prove accurate. The line moves slowly, people shifting their weight and stamping their feet against the cold. Conversation focused on speculation about what might be available and sharing information about alternative sources for scarce items. Someone mentions seeing apples at a shop near the university. Another person heard that onions might arrive at the market on Monday. When you finally reach the vegetable vendor, the selection is limited but real. Potatoes, yes, though they're small and some show signs of sprouting. Cabbage, the foundation of Soviet winter nutrition, available in quantities that allow purchasing enough for several meals. No apples, no onions, no fresh carrots, but enough basic vegetables to supplement your diet for the coming week. The meat queue is longer and more competitive, reflecting both the scarcity of protein and its essential role in working-class nutrition. Factory work requires calories and strength that vegetables alone can't provide, so families prioritize meat purchases despite the expense and difficulty of obtaining it. Today's offering is chicken, though examination reveals that the pieces are small and include more bone than meat. You purchase your allocation, 1 kilogram per person per week, according to official rationing, and accept the butcher's paper wrapping with gratitude. The chicken will provide protein for 3 meals if managed carefully, supplemented with potatoes and cabbage to create filling soups that stretch the meat across multiple days. Soviet cooking has evolved into an art of making small amounts of expensive ingredients feed families through creative combination with cheaper staples. The general goods shopping presents different challenges. Household items, soap, light bulbs, basic tools are available sporadically, and finding them requires either luck or advanced intelligence about delivery schedules. Today you need a new light bulb for your room's single fixture, but the hardware shop has only industrial bulbs designed for factory use. They're too bright and consume too much electricity, but they're what's available. The bookstore provides one of the weekend's genuine pleasures. Books are subsidized by the state and therefore affordable, part of the socialist commitment to universal literacy and cultural education. The selection is limited to approved titles, classical literature, technical manuals, ideologically correct contemporary works. But within those boundaries, the quality is often excellent. Today you purchase a volume of Tolstoy's short stories, a book you've wanted to read but haven't been able to find until now. The price is modest, the paper quality is decent, and the binding should last for years of careful reading. Books provide intellectual stimulation, entertainment during long winter evenings, and escape from the grinding routine of industrial life. In a society where most forms of entertainment are collectively organized and ideologically guided, private reading offers rare moments of individual choice and reflection. Saturday afternoon brings the weekly ritual of apartment maintenance, small repairs, deep cleaning, and the ongoing battle against the deterioration that affects all Soviet housing. Your room's window frame has developed a small gap that lets in cold air, requiring improvised weather stripping, made from strips of cloth and carefully applied soap. The technique is temporary but effective, and represents the kind of resourceful problem-solving that Soviet citizens master through necessity. The communal bathroom requires its weekly deep cleaning, a task shared among all apartment residents according to a rotating schedule. Today is your turn, which means scrubbing the toilet, sink, and bathtub with harsh soap and worn brushes, removing the accumulated grime of dozens of people using facilities designed for far fewer. The work is unpleasant but necessary, part of the social contract that makes communal living possible. The cleaning supplies are basic: a bar of laundry soap, old rags that have been repurposed multiple times, and a brush with bristles worn down to stubby ineffectiveness. But Soviet citizens have learned to achieve acceptable results with inadequate tools, applying extra effort and ingenuity to compensate for material shortcomings. The bathroom emerges clean, if not pristine, ready to serve the building's residents for another week. Saturday evening brings a different kind of social activity. The weekly building meeting where residents discuss maintenance issues, share information, and address conflicts that arise from forcing too many people to share too little space. The meetings are officially voluntary but practically mandatory, as absence is noted and might be interpreted as antisocial behavior or lack of community spirit. Tonight's meeting addresses several practical issues. The heating system has been irregular, leaving some apartments cold while others become uncomfortably warm. The garbage collection schedule has changed, requiring residents to adjust their disposal routines. A new family will be moving into the apartment previously occupied by the Mikhailov family, who relocated last month under circumstances no one discusses directly. The building representative, Comrade Volkov, leads the meeting with the bureaucratic efficiency that characterizes all official Soviet gatherings. Each issue is addressed according to established procedures, with residents invited to express their concerns within carefully defined parameters. Complaints about heating are acceptable if framed as technical problems requiring collective solutions. Complaints about living conditions are dangerous if they suggest systemic inadequacies in socialist housing policy. The social dynamics of the meeting reveal the complex relationships that develop among people forced to live in close proximity. Mrs. Kozlova and Mrs. Petrov maintain polite but distant interactions, suggesting unresolved tensions about kitchen scheduling or noise levels. The Volkov family, who occupy the largest room due to Comrade Volkov's supervisory position at the factory, are treated with the respectful deference appropriate to their slightly higher status. You participate minimally, acknowledging problems when directly asked, but avoiding suggestions that might mark you as either too passive or too involved in building politics. The safe approach is to demonstrate awareness of community issues while deferring to the judgment of residents with more seniority or better political connections. Initiative is valuable but dangerous, marking someone as either leadership material or potential troublemaker. After the meeting, residents disperse to their individual spaces, but the evening isn't finished. Saturday night is letter writing time, the weekly ritual of maintaining connections with family members who live in other cities, other republics, other parts of the vast Soviet Union. Your sister lives in Leningrad, working in a textile factory and raising 2 children with her husband, a mechanic in the Navy shipyard. The letter-writing process requires careful attention to both personal communication and political safety. Family news is safe territory, health updates, work achievements, children's progress in school. But even innocent topics carry potential risks. Complaints about shortages might be interpreted as criticism of the economic system. Expressions of longing for travel or different opportunities might suggest dissatisfaction with socialist life. Every sentence requires consideration of how it might be read by postal censors who monitor correspondence for signs of unreliable thinking. Your letter to your sister focuses on safe topics, your continued good health, steady work at the factory, satisfaction with your housing situation. You mentioned the Tolstoy book you purchased. Knowing that cultural interests are viewed favorably by authorities, you ask about her children's studies and her husband's naval service, demonstrating appropriate family concern while acknowledging the importance of their contributions to Soviet society. The letter concludes with expressions of gratitude for the opportunities socialism has provided and confidence in the bright future being built through collective effort. These formulaic phrases serve multiple purposes. They demonstrate ideological reliability, they help letters pass censorship review, and they create space for more personal communication by establishing the writer's political credentials. Sunday arrives with the mixed blessing of a day theoretically devoted to rest and personal pursuits, but practically filled with the tasks that weekday work schedules make impossible. The Soviet Union officially embraces atheism, so traditional religious observances are discouraged if not forbidden. But Sunday still carries the cultural weight of a day different from the working week. Your Sunday begins with a rare luxury, sleeping until 8 a.m. An extra hour that feels like profound indulgence after 6 days of 6:30 alarms. The apartment is quieter than usual, though not silent. Soviet apartments are never truly quiet, with too many people sharing too little space for genuine privacy or silence. But Sunday morning quiet is different from weekday quiet, lacking the urgency and tension that characterize working days. Breakfast is more elaborate than weekday meals. Eggs, when available, or at least a more generous portion of bread with preserved fruit that you've been saving for a special occasion. The pace is slower, more contemplative, allowing time to actually taste the food rather than consuming it as efficiently as possible before rushing to work. Sunday morning is also reading time, when you can devote uninterrupted attention to books, newspapers, or the technical manuals related to your factory work. Today, you begin the Tolstoy volume, settling into the familiar rhythm of Russian prose that captures both the beauty and tragedy of human experience. Reading provides intellectual stimulation, emotional engagement, and temporary escape from the immediate pressures of Soviet daily life. The stories transport you to a different Russia, a pre-revolutionary world where individual choices mattered more than collective obligations, where personal relationships developed without constant awareness of political implications, where beauty and love existed for their own sake rather than serving ideological purposes. It's a dangerous pleasure, this glimpse of alternative ways of living. But literature is officially approved, and therefore Safe to Sunday afternoon brings the weekly ritual of visiting the public baths, a social institution that serves both practical and cultural functions in Soviet life. Many apartments lack adequate bathing facilities, making the public baths essential for basic hygiene. But the baths also serve as community gathering places where people relax, socialize, and temporarily escape the constraints of their regular routines. Retreat for imagination. The bathhouse is a massive brick building designed to serve thousands of people per week, with separate sections for men and women and facilities that range from basic washing areas to more luxurious steam rooms available for additional fees. The architecture is functional, but not without beauty. High ceilings, tile work that shows attention to aesthetic detail, and natural light from windows positioned to provide illumination while maintaining privacy. The changing room reveals the democracy of nudity. Factory workers, office clerks, and even minor party officials reduced to the common humanity of unclothed bodies that show the effects of industrial labor, inadequate nutrition, and the stress of life in a controlled society. Scars from factory accidents, the muscle development of physical labor, the pallor of people who spend their days indoors. These are the honest markers of Soviet working-class life. The washing process is thorough and methodical, using soap and hot water that are more abundant here than in individual apartments. You scrub away a week's accumulation of factory grime, metal filings, and the general dirt of urban life. The hot water is a luxury, the privacy relative, the cleanliness genuine, for 30 minutes. You exist primarily as a physical being attending to basic bodily needs, rather than a worker serving industrial production. The steam room is an additional expense, but worth the cost for the deep relaxation it provides. The heat penetrates muscles tired from repetitive factory labor. The humidity soothes lungs irritated by industrial air, and the enforced stillness allows mental relaxation that's rare in the constant vigilance of Soviet life. Other bathers sit quietly, some meditating, some dozing, all enjoying the temporary suspension of external demands. Conversation in the steam room follows unwritten rules that allow more personal communication than most public spaces. The heat, nudity, and relaxation create an atmosphere where people share concerns about family, work, and daily struggles without the formal caution that characterizes most Soviet social interaction. But even here, truly sensitive topics remain off-limits, and everyone understands the boundaries between permissible complaints and dangerous criticism. Sunday evening brings the week's most challenging social obligation: attendance at the neighborhood community meeting where residents discuss local issues, participate in political education, and demonstrate their engagement with socialist community life. The meetings are theoretically voluntary but practically mandatory. As absence is noted and repeated non-attendance marks someone as antisocial or politically unreliable. The community center is a repurposed church building. Its religious symbols removed and replaced with portraits of Lenin, Stalin, and current party leaders. The architecture retains hints of its spiritual origins. High ceilings, ornate molding, stained glass windows now covered with red fabric. But the space has been thoroughly secularized and politicized. Tonight's meeting addresses several topics relevant to local life: housing assignments for new residents, coordination of volunteer labor for community improvement projects, and political education focusing on the latest policy announcements from Moscow. The format is familiar: speeches by local party representatives, opportunities for questions and comments from residents, and collective affirmation of support for party decisions. The housing discussion reveals the complex process by which living space gets allocated in the Soviet system. Available apartments are assigned based on family size, work classification, political reliability, and length of time on waiting lists. Priority goes to families with children, workers in essential industries, and individuals with exemplary records of community participation. The process is presented as fair and scientific, but everyone understands that connections and political standing influence outcomes. Your participation is minimal but visible, respectful attention during speeches, appropriate applause at designated moments, and a carefully neutral expression that suggests engagement without excessive enthusiasm. The goal is to fulfill your civic obligations while avoiding behavior that might mark you as either unreliable or suspiciously eager to please authorities. The political education segment focuses on recent agricultural achievements and the ongoing success of the current 5-year plan. The speaker, a regional party official, presents statistics showing increased production, improved living standards, and growing international recognition of Soviet achievements. The numbers are impressive, the presentation is polished, and the conclusions are optimistic about continued progress toward the communist future. But you've heard similar presentations for years, always promising that current sacrifices will yield future abundance, always explaining temporary shortages as necessary investments in long-term prosperity, always describing setbacks as minor obstacles on the inevitable path to socialist victory. The disconnect between official statistics and daily experience has become so routine that it creates its own kind of truth. The truth that official truth exists in a separate realm from practical truth. The meeting concludes with collective singing of revolutionary songs, voices joined in harmony that suggests unity while masking the individual thoughts and feelings that people keep carefully private. The songs are beautiful, stirring, designed to inspire emotional connection to the socialist cause. But even musical participation requires caution. Too much enthusiasm marks someone as potentially false. Too little suggests insufficient loyalty. Walking home through the Sunday evening streets, you pass other residents returning from similar meetings, all having fulfilled their weekly obligations to community participation and political education. The streets are quieter than weekdays, but not empty. People moving with the measured pace of those who have completed necessary tasks and can now focus on personal concerns. Sunday night preparation for the coming week involves the same careful attention to detail that characterizes all aspects of Soviet life. Clothes for Monday must be selected and prepared. Food for breakfast must be planned based on available supplies, and the small notebook must be updated with the week's observations and concerns. The routine is comforting in its predictability, providing structure and continuity in a world where larger forces remain beyond individual control. As you settle into bed Sunday night, your thoughts turn toward the week ahead. Monday will bring new production quotas, new challenges with aging factory equipment, new opportunities to demonstrate reliability and competence. The cycle of work, community obligations, and personal survival will continue, each day requiring the same careful balance between individual needs and collective demands. But tonight, you've successfully navigated another weekend in Soviet life, accomplishing necessary tasks, fulfilling social obligations, and maintaining the relationships that make communal living possible. The bar for success remains survival itself, and by that measure, you continue to succeed. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, but also new opportunities to adapt, endure, and find small victories within the constraints of the socialist system. Sleep comes with the satisfaction of having met your obligations and the quiet confidence that you'll continue meeting them tomorrow and in the weeks to come. In the Soviet Union, that consistency represents a form of personal victory worth celebrating in the privacy of your own thoughts. Monday morning arrives with a subtle but significant change in the apartment's atmosphere. Over breakfast, Mrs. Kozlova mentions in carefully neutral tones that she noticed some unfamiliar men in the courtyard yesterday evening, taking notes and asking casual questions about building residents. The information is shared without commentary, but everyone understands its implications. The neighborhood is receiving attention from the security apparatus. This development transforms routine activities into potential sources of anxiety. The walk to work, normally an automatic transition from home to factory, now requires awareness of who might be watching, who might be listening, who might be evaluating your behavior for signs of anything unusual or potentially suspicious. The same streets, the same metro stations, the same interactions with shopkeepers and fellow workers, all now carry an additional layer of significance. At the factory, Comrade Volkov calls an unscheduled meeting before work begins. Workers gather in the main assembly area while he reads an announcement about increased security measures designed to protect industrial production from potential sabotage or espionage. New identification procedures, more thorough bag inspections, and enhanced reporting protocols for unusual incidents or suspicious conversations. The announcement is delivered in the bureaucratic language that makes everything sound routine and reasonable. But the subtext is clear. Someone, somewhere, has raised questions about security at your factory. Whether the concern is legitimate or purely administrative, whether it reflects actual threats or simply the system's need to periodically demonstrate vigilance, the effect is the same: increased scrutiny of everyone's behavior. During the morning work period, you notice subtle changes in workplace dynamics. Conversations are quieter, more focused on immediate technical issues rather than general commentary about work conditions or current events. People position themselves more carefully during breaks, avoiding clusters that might suggest conspiracy or excessive familiarity. The informal social networks that make factory life bearable operate with increased caution. Your lathe develops a new mechanical problem around 10 a.m., a grinding noise that suggests bearing failure and threatens to shut down production entirely. Under normal circumstances, you would discuss the issue with fellow workers, share observations about similar problems, and collectively develop repair strategies based on accumulated experience. But today, mechanical failures carry additional significance as potential evidence of sabotage or negligence. You report the problem through official channels, documenting the issue with the precision required by new security protocols. Time of occurrence, description of symptoms, potential causes, and immediate actions taken, all recorded in the language of bureaucratic accountability that protects you from suggestions of carelessness while providing authorities with the detailed information they require for their investigations. The maintenance technician who responds to your report is someone you've worked with for 3 years. A competent mechanic who understands the factory's aging equipment and knows how to coax performance from machinery that should have been replaced decades ago. But today his approach is more formal, his questions more systematic, his documentation more thorough. Even routine maintenance becomes part of the security apparatus when authorities decide that vigilance is required. The repair takes 2 hours, during which you're reassigned to assist other workers while maintaining your production quota despite the equipment downtime. Soviet industrial planning assumes that machinery will function according to schedule, so individual equipment failures must be compensated through worker flexibility and increased effort rather than production adjustments. During lunch, the conversation at your usual table is notably different. Instead of the relaxed discussion of family concerns, workplace observations, and minor complaints that normally characterize break time, today's topics focus on technical aspects of production work, positive developments in personal life, and expressions of satisfaction with working conditions. The shift is subtle but unmistakable, everyone adjusting their public behavior to account for the possibility that conversations are being monitored more closely than usual. The afternoon brings a visit from representatives of the regional party office. 2 men in dark suits who tour the factory floor with clipboards and serious expressions. Their presence changes the energy of the entire workplace. Workers focusing more intently on their tasks, while supervisors adopt the heightened attentiveness that demonstrates proper management vigilance. The visitors stop at your workstation, examining your repaired lathe and asking questions about the morning's mechanical problems. Their inquiry is polite but thorough, covering technical details, repair procedures, and your assessment of the equipment's current condition. You respond with the careful precision that such situations require. Complete honesty about technical facts combined with appropriate confidence in the factory's management and maintenance systems. One of the visitors asks about your experience with machinery failures, whether you've noticed patterns or recurring problems that might suggest systemic issues requiring attention from higher authorities. The question carries multiple layers of meaning. They could be gathering information about maintenance needs, investigating potential sabotage, or testing your willingness to identify problems that might reflect poorly on local management. Your response emphasizes the competence of the maintenance staff, the adequacy of repair procedures, and your confidence that isolated equipment failures represent normal wear rather than any systematic problems. It's a safe answer that provides useful information while avoiding suggestions of either negligence or conspiracy. After work, the journey home requires navigation of the same streets that now carry additional significance due to the morning's information about unfamiliar observers. You vary your route slightly, taking a longer path that allows observation of whether anyone might be following your movements. The precaution is probably unnecessary, but in the Soviet system, unnecessary caution is safer than insufficient caution. The evening shopping routine takes place under the assumption that purchases, conversations, and even casual interactions might be noted by observers tasked with building comprehensive pictures of neighborhood residents' daily activities. The bread queue becomes a place where you practice the art of being simultaneously social and careful, maintaining normal relationships while avoiding topics or behaviors that might attract unwanted attention. Volkov from the fourth floor mentions that her husband heard rumors about upcoming changes in housing policy, possibly affecting allocation procedures for families seeking larger apartments. The information is shared in the careful language that allows community members to exchange useful intelligence while maintaining plausible deniability about the sources and accuracy of their knowledge. Back in your communal apartment, the evening routine proceeds with heightened awareness of how normal activities might appear to outside observers. Cooking, cleaning, reading, and personal maintenance all continue according to established patterns, while you consider how these routine behaviors contribute to the overall picture of your reliability and political consciousness. The weekly letter to your sister requires extra attention to language and content, ensuring that family communication reflects appropriate attitudes while conveying genuine personal concern. News about your work emphasizes satisfaction and productivity. Updates about housing stress, the adequacy of your accommodations, and observations about current events demonstrate proper understanding of official policies and their beneficial effects. Tuesday brings news that the unfamiliar observers have expanded their activities to include conversations with building superintendents, shop managers, and local party representatives. The information flows through the informal communication networks that parallel official channels, allowing residents to prepare for potential interviews or investigations while maintaining the appearance of normal routine compliance. At the factory, production quotas have been increased by 15% as part of a new efficiency initiative designed to demonstrate the workforce's commitment to socialist achievement. The increase is presented as an opportunity rather than a burden, a chance for workers to showcase their capabilities while contributing to the ongoing success of the 5-year plan. Meeting the higher quotas requires adjustments to work methods, closer coordination among team members, and acceptance of longer hours without corresponding increases in compensation. The changes are implemented with the cheerful determination that characterizes all official Soviet responses to increased demands, a combination of genuine effort and careful performance designed to demonstrate the proper attitude toward collective challenges. Your repaired lathe performs adequately under the increased production pressure, though the grinding noise returns periodically, suggesting that the underlying bearing problem hasn't been completely resolved. You document the intermittent symptoms while maintaining quota performance through closer attention to machine operation and preventive maintenance procedures that you perform. During brief breaks in the production schedule, the workplace atmosphere remains heightened, with supervisors demonstrating increased attention to quality control, safety procedures, and worker performance evaluation. The changes are presented as routine improvements rather than responses to external pressure, but everyone understands that the factory is operating under enhanced scrutiny that requires corresponding adjustments in behavior and performance. Wednesday evening brings the monthly apartment building meeting. Normally a routine discussion of maintenance issues and community concerns, tonight's meeting includes a presentation by a local party representative about the importance of community vigilance in protecting socialist society from potential threats posed by individuals who might not fully appreciate the benefits of the Soviet system. The presentation covers familiar themes: the historical struggles required to build socialism, the ongoing efforts of capitalist powers to undermine Soviet achievements, and the crucial role that ordinary citizens play in maintaining security through awareness of unusual behaviors or suspicious activities in their communities. The speaker emphasizes that vigilance doesn't mean suspicion of neighbors or friends, but rather educated awareness of behaviors that might suggest someone is experiencing ideological confusion or external influence that could lead them away from proper socialist consciousness. Citizens are encouraged to report concerns not as accusations, but as opportunities to provide assistance to community members who might benefit from additional political education or support. Following the presentation, residents are invited to share observations about their neighborhoods. Though the discussion remains carefully general rather than focusing on specific individuals or incidents, Mrs. Kozlova mentions increased litter in the courtyard. Mr. Petrov notes that street lighting has been irregular, and several people express appreciation for recent improvements in garbage collection services. You participate minimally, acknowledging the importance of community cooperation while avoiding comments that might suggest either excessive vigilance or insufficient attention to security concerns. The balance requires careful calibration, enough engagement to demonstrate proper civic consciousness without creating impressions of unusual knowledge or concerns about neighborhood activities. Thursday brings news through informal channels that the security review has expanded to include examination of workplace efficiency records, housing allocation histories, and community participation patterns. The investigation appears to be comprehensive rather than targeted, suggesting either routine systematic review or response to general policy directives rather than specific security threats. At work, this information translates into heightened attention to documentation, more formal communication between supervisors and workers, and increased emphasis on productivity metrics that demonstrate both individual competence and collective success. The changes affect workplace atmosphere without dramatically altering actual production procedures or technical requirements. Your lathe continues functioning despite the persistent bearing noise, and you maintain quota performance through the combination of technical skill and increased work intensity that Soviet industrial culture has developed to compensate for inadequate equipment and materials. The approach requires physical stamina, mental concentration, and acceptance of working conditions that prioritize production over worker comfort. Friday evening brings subtle indications that the enhanced security measures are beginning to relax. The unfamiliar observers are seen less frequently. Workplace documentation requirements return to normal levels, and community conversations resume their typical balance of caution and sociability. Whether the review has concluded or simply moved to different neighborhoods remains unclear, but the immediate pressure seems to be diminishing. The weekend approaches with the mixed relief and continuing vigilance that characterizes Soviet life. During periods of increased official attention, normal routines continue, but with enhanced awareness that any behavior or conversation might be noted, evaluated, and included in assessments of individual reliability and community stability. Saturday morning cleanup proceeds with particular attention to ensuring that your personal space and possessions reflect the proper attitudes toward work, community, and political responsibility. Books are arranged to emphasize approved literature. Personal papers are organized to demonstrate systematic habits and careful record-keeping. And clothing is maintained in condition that suggests both adequate prosperity and appropriate modesty. The weekly shopping expedition requires navigation of stores and markets where clerks and vendors might be paying additional attention to customer behavior, purchase patterns, and social interactions. You buy basic necessities while maintaining friendly but reserved relationships with shopkeepers who serve dozens of customers daily and therefore occupy important positions in the informal intelligence networks that supplement official surveillance systems. Sunday's community meeting proceeds with the heightened formality that follows periods of increased security attention. Discussions focus on positive developments in local life, expressions of gratitude for party leadership, and affirmations of confidence in the continuing progress toward full communist society. The tone is more ceremonial than conversational, reflecting everyone's awareness that community gatherings receive particular scrutiny during security reviews. As the week concludes, you've successfully navigated another period of enhanced surveillance without incident or attention. The experience reinforces lessons that every Soviet citizen learns through repeated experience: the importance of consistent behavior, careful communication, and maintained relationships that demonstrate proper integration into socialist community life. The surveillance state operates not through dramatic confrontations or obvious intimidation, but through the quiet pressure of knowing that your activities might be observed, your conversations might be reported, and your attitudes might be evaluated by authorities whose standards and procedures remain largely invisible to ordinary citizens. Success in this system requires developing habits of caution that become automatic, maintaining relationships that demonstrate reliability while avoiding excessive intimacy, and balancing individual needs with collective obligations in ways that consistently demonstrate proper socialist consciousness. Tonight, settling into bed after successfully completing another week under enhanced scrutiny, you reflect on the complex skills required for survival in a society where privacy is limited, trust is dangerous, and success is measured primarily by the absence of negative attention from authorities whose power affects every aspect of daily life. Monday morning brings news that illustrates the gap between official Soviet ideology and practical reality in ways that every citizen recognizes but cannot publicly acknowledge. The radio announces record-breaking agricultural production figures while Mrs. Kozlova quietly mentions that the bread shop has been closed for 2 days due to supply shortages. The disconnect is so routine that it barely registers as noteworthy anymore. At the factory, production targets have been revised upward again based on the theoretical capabilities of equipment that exists only in planning documents. Your actual lathe, with its persistent bearing problems and 1930s technology, is expected to achieve output levels that would challenge modern machinery operated under ideal conditions. The gap between planned performance and possible performance has become so wide that bridging it requires constant creativity and occasional deception. The morning production meeting includes enthusiastic reports about overfulfillment of quotas in other factories, improved efficiency through worker innovation, and the ongoing success of the 5-year plan in achieving rapid industrial growth. Meanwhile, half the machines in your section are operating below capacity due to maintenance issues, spare parts shortages, and the accumulated wear of decades without adequate investment in equipment replacement. You've learned to navigate this contradiction through the art of creative compliance, achieving enough actual production to keep the factory running while generating enough paperwork to satisfy the reporting requirements that feed into the statistical system. The real skill lies in understanding which numbers matter to whom and calibrating your performance to meet the minimum requirements of both practical production and bureaucratic documentation. Around mid-morning, your lathe's bearing problem escalates from annoying noise to actual mechanical failure, forcing a complete production halt while you wait for maintenance assistance. In the official system, such failures are rare anomalies that can be quickly resolved through proper procedures. In reality, equipment breakdowns are daily occurrences that require improvised solutions using salvaged parts and mechanical ingenuity that isn't taught in any technical manual. The maintenance technician arrives with the resigned expression of someone who spends his days performing mechanical miracles with inadequate tools and impossible deadlines. Together you examine the failed bearing and develop a repair strategy that involves components cannibalized from other machines, temporary fixes that might last weeks or days, and documentation that will satisfy official requirements while bearing little resemblance to actual repair procedures. The repair process reveals the extent to which Soviet industrial production depends on the accumulated knowledge and improvised solutions of workers who have learned to make broken systems function through sheer determination and creative problem-solving. Official technical manuals describe procedures that require parts and tools that don't exist. Actual repairs involve techniques passed down through informal networks of experienced workers who understand the real capabilities and limitations of Soviet manufacturing. By afternoon, your lathe is running again, producing components that meet minimum quality standards through a combination of the morning's repairs and your own adjustments to compensate for the machine's continuing mechanical compromises. The day's production quota will be met, the paperwork will show satisfactory performance, and the system will continue operating despite the gap between official capabilities and actual conditions. During the lunch break, conversation turns to the broader contradictions that shape daily life throughout Soviet society. Someone mentions seeing luxury goods in special shops reserved for party officials, while basic necessities remain scarce in regular stores. Another worker observes that housing construction statistics show rapid progress, while waiting lists for apartments continue growing longer each year. These conversations require careful navigation between acknowledgement of obvious realities and avoidance of criticism that might be interpreted as political unreliability. The skill lies in discussing practical problems as technical challenges rather than systematic failures, individual shortcomings rather than ideological contradictions, temporary obstacles rather than permanent features of the socialist system. Tuesday brings a visit from efficiency experts sent by the Regional Planning Authority to evaluate workplace productivity and identify opportunities for improvement. Their clipboards contain forms designed to measure performance according to theoretical standards that assume properly functioning equipment, adequate materials, and optimal working conditions. The actual factory, with its improvised solutions and creative workarounds, doesn't fit easily into their analytical categories. The experts interview workers about their production methods, equipment conditions, and suggestions for improving efficiency. You respond with careful honesty about technical issues while emphasizing your satisfaction with working conditions and confidence in management's commitment to continuous improvement. The balance requires acknowledging problems that are too obvious to deny while maintaining optimism about solutions that may or may not be practically feasible. Your lathe receives particular attention due to its recent repair and the creative modifications that have kept it operational despite fundamental mechanical problems. The experts examine the improvised bearing assembly, the jury-rigged cooling system, and the hand-calibrated controls that compensate for worn components. Their questions reveal the gap between engineering theory and maintenance reality that characterizes much of Soviet industrial infrastructure. The efficiency evaluation concludes with recommendations for equipment upgrades, process improvements, and worker training programs that would address many of the factory's actual problems. The recommendations are technically sound, practically beneficial, and completely unrealistic given the resources available for implementation. They'll be filed with appropriate bureaucratic ceremony and forgotten until the next evaluation cycle. Wednesday evening brings the monthly cultural education meeting where community members gather to discuss literature, attend lectures about scientific achievements, and participate in ideologically appropriate entertainment activities. Tonight's program includes a presentation about recent advances in space technology, demonstrating Soviet superiority in scientific research and technological innovation. The presentation is genuinely impressive, describing achievements that represent real progress in human knowledge and capability. Soviet scientists and engineers have accomplished remarkable things, despite working within a system that often prioritizes political reliability over technical competence. The successes are real, even if they coexist with failures and inefficiencies that receive less public attention. Following the scientific presentation, the evening includes a poetry reading featuring works by approved contemporary authors who celebrate socialist themes through traditional Russian literary forms. The poetry is often beautiful, sometimes moving, and occasionally profound despite its ideological constraints. Art finds ways to express human truths, even when operating within political frameworks that limit direct exploration of difficult subjects. The cultural evening concludes with group singing of folk songs that connect contemporary Soviet citizens with their Russian cultural heritage while supporting current political values. Music provides emotional experiences that transcend ideological boundaries, creating moments of genuine community feeling that coexist with the careful social navigation required for survival in a controlled society. Thursday brings news about economic achievements that illustrate the complex relationship between statistical success and practical improvement in daily life. Production figures show impressive growth in heavy industry while consumer goods remain scarce. Employment statistics demonstrate full employment while workers struggle with inadequate tools and materials. Investment numbers indicate massive infrastructure development, while basic services like heating and transportation operate with chronic reliability problems. At work, these contradictions translate into pressure to achieve ambitious targets using resources that remain fundamentally inadequate for the tasks assigned. Your production quota increases by another 10%, while your lathe continues operating with the same mechanical problems that have limited its capability for months. Meeting the new targets requires working longer hours, accepting lower quality standards, and hoping that equipment failures don't completely derail production schedules. The factory's response to increased pressure involves the familiar Soviet strategy of mobilizing worker enthusiasm to compensate for systematic inadequacies. Motivational speeches emphasize the importance of individual effort in achieving collective goals. Voluntary overtime programs provide opportunities to demonstrate exceptional dedication, and worker competitions create psychological incentives that substitute for material improvements in working conditions. You participate in these programs with the measured enthusiasm that demonstrates proper political consciousness, while avoiding the excessive zeal that might mark you as either unusually ambitious or insufficiently realistic about practical limitations. The balance requires understanding how much additional effort is expected, appreciated, and safe to provide. Friday afternoon brings an announcement about upcoming celebrations for the anniversary of the October Revolution, including workplace festivities, community parades, and opportunities for citizens to express their gratitude for the achievements of socialist construction. The celebrations require active participation that demonstrates proper revolutionary spirit, while providing genuine enjoyment for participants who appreciate the rare break from routine work schedules. Preparation for the anniversary involves decorating the factory with banners, organizing worker choruses to perform revolutionary songs, and planning speeches that will emphasize the connection between daily industrial labor and the broader historical mission of building communist society. The activities combine genuine celebration with political theater, creating events that serve multiple purposes simultaneously. Your participation includes joining the factory choir, volunteering for decoration committee work, and contributing to the collective effort to make the celebration both ideologically appropriate and personally meaningful. The activities provide opportunities for social interaction, creative expression, and temporary relief from the grinding routine of industrial production, while fulfilling the civic obligations that citizenship requires. The weekend arrives with the familiar mixture of relief at escaping work pressures and anxiety about accomplishing the personal tasks that make continued survival possible. Saturday's shopping expedition takes place amid preparations for the anniversary celebration, with shops displaying revolutionary slogans and workers organizing special sales events that may or may not include actual merchandise improvements. The anniversary preparation creates a distinctive atmosphere throughout the city, with red banners, portrait displays, and decorative installations that transform ordinary urban spaces into stages for political celebration. The visual impact is impressive, demonstrating the Soviet system's capacity for large-scale coordinated activity while masking the underlying struggles with chronic shortages and infrastructure problems that affect daily life. Sunday's community meeting focuses on planning local participation in the anniversary celebration, including parade formations, cultural presentations, and volunteer activities that will demonstrate neighborhood residents' commitment to revolutionary values. The planning process combines genuine enthusiasm for festive activities with careful attention to the political symbolism that makes such events successful by official standards. Your own contribution involves joining the neighborhood marching group that will participate in the local parade, wearing your best clothes to demonstrate prosperity and dedication, while carrying banners that express collective support for party leadership and socialist achievements. The participation is both voluntary and mandatory, enjoyable and obligatory, celebratory and performative. As the week concludes, you reflect on the constant navigation required to live successfully within a system characterized by fundamental contradictions between ideological claims and practical realities. Every day requires balancing honest acknowledgement of obvious problems with public expressions of confidence in official solutions. Individual needs with collective obligations, personal observations with politically acceptable interpretations. The skill that Soviet citizens developed through years of practice involves maintaining psychological health while adapting to circumstances that often seem irrational or counterproductive. Success requires accepting that multiple versions of truth can coexist. Official truth, practical truth, personal truth, each serving different purposes and requiring different responses. Tonight, preparing for sleep after another week of navigating systematic contradictions, you take satisfaction in having met your obligations while preserving your sanity, achieved your quotas while maintaining your integrity, and participated in collective activities while retaining your individual perspective on the complex realities of Soviet life. The system continues functioning despite its contradictions, perhaps because of them, creating a society that combines genuine achievements with persistent problems, real progress with obvious failures, sincere idealism with practical cynicism. Tomorrow will bring new challenges requiring the same careful balance between compliance and survival that characterizes daily life in the Soviet Union. The morning begins with news that brings the human cost of Soviet life into sharp focus. Mrs. Kozlova's nephew, a bright young man who worked at a chemical plant in Tula, died in an industrial accident that could have been prevented with safety equipment that was ordered 6 months ago but never arrived. The family grieves quietly, their sorrow mixed with the frustration that comes from knowing their loss was unnecessary, predictable, and entirely avoidable. Such accidents are officially rare in Soviet industry, where safety regulations are comprehensive and worker protection is a fundamental priority of socialist management. Unofficially, industrial accidents occur regularly as the inevitable result of production pressures that prioritize quotas over safety, aging equipment that lacks proper maintenance, and safety systems that exist more completely on paper than in physical reality. Mrs. Kozlova shares this tragic news in the careful, neutral tone that Soviet citizens use when discussing events that reveal uncomfortable truths about their system. The young man's death will be classified as an unfortunate accident. His family will receive modest compensation, and the incident will generate paperwork demonstrating that appropriate investigations were conducted and preventive measures were implemented. The gap between official response and actual change will remain invisible to anyone who doesn't work directly in industrial settings. At your own factory, safety conditions reflect the same tensions between policy and practice that characterize the chemical plant where Mrs. Kozlova's nephew died. Posted regulations describe comprehensive protective measures, but the actual safety equipment is often unavailable, broken, or inadequate for the conditions it's supposed to address. Workers develop their own protective strategies based on experience and mutual cooperation, rather than relying on official safety systems. Your workstation exemplifies these compromises. The lathe should be equipped with proper guards, adequate lighting, and ventilation systems that remove metal particles from the air you breathe during 8-hour shifts. In reality, the guards were removed years ago because they interfered with production efficiency. The lighting is insufficient for precision work, and the ventilation system operates sporadically depending on power allocation priorities determined by factors beyond your understanding. You've adapted by developing personal safety practices that provide some protection while allowing you to meet production quotas. Safety glasses salvaged from other equipment, improvised dust masks made from cloth scraps, and positioning techniques that minimize exposure to flying metal debris. These measures offer limited protection, but they represent the difference between significant health risks and catastrophic health risks. The morning production meeting includes the routine safety reminder that factory management provides to demonstrate compliance with regulatory requirements. Workers are encouraged to report safety hazards, follow established procedures, and prioritize personal protection over production goals. The presentation is sincere, the advice is sound, and the gap between recommendations and practical possibilities remains unacknowledged by both speakers and audience. Following the safety presentation, work begins with the familiar tension between protective caution and productive efficiency. Every machine operation involves calculated risks, how closely to work, how much exposure to accept, how many shortcuts to take in pursuit of quota achievement. The calculations are individual, based on each worker's assessment of immediate dangers versus long-term consequences. Personal health concerns versus economic survival needs. Your lathe continues operating with the mechanical problems that create additional safety hazards beyond those inherent in metalworking operations. Vibrations that could cause loss of control, unpredictable movements that could result in serious injury, and noise levels that damage hearing over time. You compensate through heightened attention and modified techniques. But the fundamental dangers remain unchanged by your adaptations. Around mid-morning, a minor accident in Section 3 illustrates the human cost of these working conditions. Ivan Petrov, operating a drill press with worn safety mechanisms, suffers a deep cut when a piece of metal breaks free and strikes his hand. The injury isn't life-threatening, but it requires immediate medical attention and will prevent him from working for several days. The factory medical station provides basic treatment, cleaning, bandaging, and pain medication. But the injury requires follow-up care that strains both Ivan's family resources and the overcrowded public health system. Lost wages during recovery time create additional hardship for a family already struggling with the basic costs of Soviet life. The accident report will describe the incident as operator error, avoiding questions about equipment maintenance or safety system adequacy. Ivan's accident affects workplace atmosphere in subtle but significant ways. Other workers become more cautious, slowing production slightly as they pay additional attention to potential hazards. Supervisors increase their safety reminders while continuing to emphasize quota achievement. The balance between protection and production shifts temporarily, but gradually returns to normal as immediate concerns fade and production pressures reassert themselves. During lunch, conversation inevitably turns to workplace safety and the broader question of how Soviet citizens balance personal welfare with system demands. Someone mentions a friend who developed lung problems from chemical exposure at a textile plant. Another worker talks about back injuries caused by lifting equipment that's too heavy for safe manual handling. The stories accumulate into a picture of systematic health impacts that rarely receive official acknowledgement or systematic attention. These conversations require careful navigation between legitimate concern for worker welfare and criticism that might be interpreted as undermining confidence in socialist industrial management. Workers share information about protective techniques, discuss symptoms that might indicate developing health problems, and offer mutual support for dealing with medical issues that arise from working conditions. The solidarity is genuine, but it operates within boundaries defined by political necessity. Tuesday brings news about changes in workplace compensation policies that illustrate another aspect of the human cost of Soviet life. New regulations modify the calculation methods for disability payments, reducing benefits for workers who suffer long-term health impacts from industrial employment. The changes are presented as reforms that improve efficiency and prevent abuse, but their practical effect is to shift more of the cost of workplace injuries and illnesses onto individual workers and their families. The policy changes affect workers like yourself, who already show early signs of health problems related to years of industrial labor. Joint pain from repetitive motions, respiratory irritation from metal dust exposure, and hearing loss from constant machinery noise. These occupational health impacts accumulate gradually and may not become severe enough to qualify for disability benefits until after the new regulations have reduced available compensation. Your own health inventory reveals the subtle but accumulating damage of factory work performed under suboptimal conditions. Persistent back pain from bending over the lathe, hand stiffness from gripping tools for hours each day, and the chronic fatigue that comes from working in environments where physical stress is constant and recovery time is limited. None of these problems are severe enough to prevent continued work, but they represent the slow erosion of physical capability that characterizes industrial employment in the Soviet system. The factory medical officer conducts routine health evaluations that document worker condition while carefully avoiding observations that might suggest systematic problems with working conditions or safety equipment. Your evaluation shows acceptable health status for continued industrial employment, with minor recommendations for rest and exercise that are practically impossible to implement given your work schedule and living conditions. Wednesday evening brings a community meeting focused on public health initiatives designed to improve citizen welfare through collective action and individual responsibility. The presentation covers proper nutrition, exercise benefits, and preventive measures that can reduce the incidence of common health problems. The advice is scientifically sound, medically beneficial, and largely irrelevant to people whose health problems stem from working and living conditions that remain beyond individual control. The nutrition recommendations assume access to fresh vegetables, adequate protein, and dietary variety that simply aren't available through regular Soviet food distribution systems. Exercise suggestions require time and space that workers lack after long factory shifts in cramped communal apartments. Preventive measures focus on lifestyle choices rather than environmental factors like air quality, workplace safety, and housing conditions that have greater impact on public health outcomes. You participate in the health discussion with the same careful balance that characterizes all public conversations in Soviet life, acknowledging the value of official recommendations while privately understanding their limitations, expressing optimism about health improvement possibilities, while personally managing the health impacts of circumstances that remain unchanged by policy announcements. Thursday brings personal confrontation with the healthcare system that serves Soviet workers and their families. A persistent cough that's been developing over recent weeks becomes severe enough to require medical attention, forcing navigation of the public health bureaucracy that provides universal healthcare access through procedures that can be more challenging than the health problems they're designed to address. The local clinic operates according to principles of socialist medicine, healthcare as a right rather than a commodity, universal access regardless of economic status, and medical decisions based on professional judgment rather than ability to pay. These principles are genuinely progressive and represent real advantages over capitalist healthcare systems that deny care to people who can't afford treatment. But the practical reality involves overcrowded facilities, overworked medical staff, and resource limitations that affect the quality and timeliness of care available to ordinary citizens. Your appointment requires waiting 3 hours to see a doctor who has 15 minutes to evaluate your condition, recommend treatment, and complete paperwork that documents the interaction for administrative and statistical purposes. The diagnosis is bronchitis, likely caused by prolonged exposure to metalworking dust and fumes that your factory's ventilation system doesn't adequately remove. Treatment involves rest, medication, and temporary reduction in physical exertion. Recommendations that conflict directly with production quotas, medication availability, and the economic necessity of continued work regardless of health status. The prescribed medication is theoretically available through the state pharmacy system, but actual availability depends on supply chains, distribution priorities, and the complex allocation processes that determine which medicines reach which locations at which times. You join the pharmacy queue with the prescription and the hope that today's delivery includes the specific antibiotics your condition requires. After 2 hours in the pharmacy queue, you learn that the prescribed medication isn't currently available, but alternative treatments might arrive next week or might be available at other pharmacies across the city. The pharmacist provides a list of possible locations and suggests returning tomorrow to check for new deliveries. Managing your health condition becomes a part-time job requiring time and energy that your work schedule and physical condition make difficult to provide. Friday brings the challenge of continuing factory work while managing bronchitis symptoms that the unavailable medication could have addressed more effectively. Production quotas don't adjust for individual health problems, so meeting daily targets requires pushing through fatigue, coughing fits, and the general malaise that makes physical labor more difficult and potentially dangerous. Your supervisor expresses appropriate concern for your health while emphasizing the importance of maintaining production schedules that affect the entire factory's performance. The message is clear. Personal health problems are regrettable, but cannot be allowed to interfere with collective obligations and socialist production goals. Workers are expected to manage their health issues around their work responsibilities, rather than vice versa. The day's production becomes a test of determination over physical limitation, requiring constant attention to both lathe operation and symptom management. Coughing fits interrupt work rhythm, fatigue affects concentration, and the overall feeling of illness makes routine tasks more challenging. But the quota must be met. The production schedule must be maintained, and individual health concerns must be subordinated to collective needs. By afternoon, your condition has worsened to the point where continuing work becomes genuinely dangerous, not just to your own health, but to workplace safety as reduced alertness and physical capability increase the risk of accidents that could affect other workers. You request permission to leave early, initiating a bureaucratic process that requires medical justification, supervisory approval, and documentation that protects both you and the factory from potential liability issues. The early departure is approved with reluctance and careful documentation that emphasizes the temporary nature of the health problem and your commitment to returning to full productivity as soon as medical conditions permit. Missing work, even for legitimate health reasons, creates complications that affect everything from pay calculations to performance evaluations to future advancement opportunities. Saturday's attempt to find medication continues. The previous day's pharmacy expedition across a city where medical supplies are distributed according to complex priority systems that ordinary citizens don't fully understand. Different pharmacies receive different medications at different times. Creating a system where obtaining treatment requires either remarkable luck or extensive knowledge of distribution patterns that most people acquire through trial and error. You eventually locate the prescribed antibiotics at a pharmacy near the university, where medical supplies intended for student health services occasionally become available to general public. The medication is expensive relative to your weekly wages, but health concerns override economic considerations when survival is at stake. The antibiotics represent hope for recovery that will allow return to normal work and life routines. Sunday's community meeting proceeds with your participation limited by continued illness, but attendance remains important for maintaining the social connections and political visibility that characterize responsible citizenship. The discussion focuses on community health initiatives that could improve public welfare through collective action and individual responsibility, topics that seem more relevant when you're personally experiencing the gaps between healthcare ideals and practical realities. The week concludes with gradual improvement in your health condition, as the antibiotics begin addressing the bronchitis symptoms that interfered with work and daily activities. But the experience has reinforced awareness of your vulnerability within a system that provides universal healthcare access while struggling to deliver timely, effective treatment for conditions that arise from the working and living conditions that socialism has created. Recovery brings mixed feelings, relief at avoiding more serious health consequences, gratitude for eventually obtaining necessary treatment, and concern about the systematic factors that created health risks in the first place. Your experience reflects broader patterns affecting millions of Soviet workers whose health is gradually compromised by industrial employment performed under conditions that prioritize production over protection. As you prepare for sleep Sunday night, your thoughts turn toward the coming week and the return to factory work that your recovering health will make possible. The bronchitis episode has provided an unwelcome reminder of your physical vulnerability and the limitations of the healthcare system that serves your community. But it has also demonstrated your resilience and the mutual support networks that help Soviet citizens navigate health crises within the constraints of their political and economic system. Tomorrow will bring new challenges requiring the same careful balance between personal welfare and collective obligations that characterizes daily life throughout Soviet society. Your health scare has passed, but the underlying conditions that created it remain unchanged, ensuring that similar challenges will arise again for you and countless other workers whose individual well-being must be constantly negotiated against the demands of socialist industrial production. The weeks blur together into months, and the months into years, each day bringing the same careful navigation between personal survival and political compliance that defines life in the Soviet Union. You've learned to read the subtle signs that indicate when extra caution is needed, when opportunities might arise, when the system's contradictions create small spaces for individual agency within collective constraints. Your lathe has been replaced, finally, with newer equipment that works better but still requires the same creative maintenance and operator skill that characterized the old machine. Quotas continue rising, safety equipment remains inadequate, and the gap between official policies and practical realities persists with the consistency that has made adaptation a survival skill throughout Soviet society. Mrs. Kozlova's family has adjusted to life without their nephew, his absence absorbed into the statistical records that track industrial accidents. While his personal loss continues affecting relatives who must find ways to grieve within a system that doesn't officially acknowledge the preventable nature of his death, new workers have joined the factory, bringing the same hopes and energy that you once possessed, learning the same lessons about balancing idealism with pragmatism that every Soviet citizen must master. The surveillance that once heightened everyone's anxiety has returned to its normal background level, always present but usually invisible. Always a factor in decision-making, but rarely requiring dramatic changes in behavior. Community life continues with its mixture of genuine cooperation and careful distance, mutual aid and potential betrayal, solidarity and suspicion that characterizes relationships in a society where personal loyalties must be balanced against political obligations. Your health has stabilized after the bronchitis episode, though the underlying conditions that created respiratory problems remain unchanged. Other workers have experienced similar health challenges, and the factory medical station has become more familiar territory as the accumulated effects of industrial employment require increasing attention. The healthcare system continues providing universal access to medical care that is both genuinely beneficial and chronically inadequate for addressing the systematic sources of public health problems. The apartment building has gained new residents and lost others, the turnover reflecting both the mobility that Soviet job assignments create and the disappearances that remind everyone of their vulnerability to political decisions made by authorities whose reasoning remains largely invisible to ordinary citizens. Your own small room has become more familiar, more personal, more clearly yours despite the technical reality that private property doesn't exist in socialist society. Seasons change with the reliable rhythm that provides stability amid political uncertainties. Spring brings hope for warmer weather and fresh food. Summer allows brief escapes from industrial routine. Autumn demands preparation for winter's challenges. And winter tests the survival skills that every Soviet citizen must develop. The cycle repeats with variations that keep life interesting while maintaining the fundamental patterns that make long-term planning possible. The radio continues broadcasting optimistic reports about socialist achievements while shortages, accidents, and systematic problems persist in ways that everyone notices but cannot publicly acknowledge. You've learned to extract useful information from official announcements while maintaining the skeptical realism that helps distinguish between propaganda and practical guidance. The skill has become automatic, requiring no conscious effort to separate political performance from substantive content. Your relationships with family, neighbors, and co-workers have deepened despite the constraints that limit intimacy and trust in Soviet society. Letters to your sister continue providing emotional connection across geographical distance. Though the careful language required for postal security makes genuine communication challenging, workplace friendships offer mutual support within the boundaries defined by political necessity. Community relationships provide the cooperation essential for shared survival, while maintaining the distance required for individual protection. The economic system continues functioning despite its obvious inefficiencies and periodic crises. Held together by the resourcefulness of workers who make broken systems operate through improvisation and determination, you've become expert at achieving production targets with inadequate resources. Maintaining equipment through creative repair techniques, and finding scarce goods through informal networks that supplement official distribution systems. Political education remains a regular feature of community life. The meetings and presentations that reinforce ideological messages while providing social interaction and occasional entertainment. You participate with the measured enthusiasm that demonstrates proper consciousness while avoiding the excessive zeal that might suggest insincerity or hidden agendas. The balance has become natural, requiring no conscious calculation to maintain appropriate political visibility. The future remains officially bright and personally uncertain, characterized by promises of eventual abundance that may or may not materialize, and individual fates that depend on factors largely beyond personal control. You've learned to plan carefully for immediate needs while maintaining hope for gradual improvements that experience suggests will be limited and slow to arrive. As another day ends, and you prepare for sleep in your small room in the communal apartment that has become home, your thoughts turn toward the complex legacy of living through this particular moment in human history. You've witnessed both the genuine achievements and obvious failures of an ambitious attempt to reorganize human society according to principles of equality, cooperation, and collective ownership. The experiment has produced real benefits: universal health care, guaranteed employment, educational opportunities, and social support systems that provide security for ordinary citizens in ways that capitalist societies often fail to achieve. But it has also created systematic problems: chronic shortages, political repression, economic inefficiencies, and social tensions that affect every aspect of daily life. Your own experience illustrates both the possibilities and limitations of socialist organization. You've found meaningful work, adequate housing, and community relationships within a system that also constrains individual freedom, limits personal choice, and requires constant vigilance about political acceptability. The balance sheet of costs and benefits remains complex, personal, and impossible to calculate with the precision that either supporters or critics of the Soviet system typically claim. Tomorrow will bring new challenges and opportunities within the framework that shapes life for hundreds of millions of people across the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe. The system will continue evolving in response to both internal pressures and external circumstances, creating new possibilities while maintaining the fundamental structures that define socialist society. Your role in this vast historical experiment remains small but significant. One individual among millions who must find ways to live meaningful, productive, and ethical lives within circumstances they didn't choose and cannot significantly change. The daily decisions about work, relationships, and personal integrity that you make contribute to the overall character of Soviet society while determining the quality and direction of your individual existence. The weight of history presses on every choice, every relationship, every moment of private reflection about the world you inhabit and the future you help create through your actions and attitudes. You carry that weight with the dignity and determination that ordinary people have always summoned when confronted with circumstances that test their resilience and challenge their beliefs about what human life can and should become. Sleep comes with the satisfaction of having navigated another day successfully, meeting your obligations while preserving your humanity, contributing to collective goals while maintaining individual integrity. In the Soviet Union, as everywhere else, that represents a form of victory worth celebrating in the quiet privacy of your own thoughts, before consciousness fades into dreams that may offer glimpses of alternative possibilities and different futures. The story continues as it must, with tomorrow's challenges and opportunities, setbacks and small victories, personal struggles and collective achievements that define life in one of history's most ambitious and controversial experiments in human social organization. Your small part in that story matters, both to you and to the larger human community that will ultimately judge the costs and benefits of the society you helped create through your daily choices and persistent determination to survive and thrive despite everything.